Have you ever walked into a room, certain you were right, ready for the fight, and then looked up and realized the person standing across from you is someone you love? Something breaks in that moment, not your argument, not your resolve, something deeper, something inside your chest that no words, no logic, no amount of being right can ever put back together. Today I'm going to tell you about the exact moment this happened to someone on the biggest battlefield in human history, and I'm going to tell you why that same fracture is already happening inside you. But first, let me ask you something. You've been in a fight with someone. Maybe it's a parent, maybe a sibling, maybe someone who used to be your closest friend, and on the surface, you're angry. You've rehearsed your arguments, you've built your case in your head 1,000 times. But here's what you haven't told anyone. Late at night, when the house goes quiet and the anger settles like dust, you miss them. You scroll to their name in your phone and just stare at it. You don't call, you don't text, but you can't delete it either. You're holding a sword in one hand and a photograph in the other, and you don't know which one to put down. If that's you right now, stay with me, because what I'm about to share didn't come from a therapist or a self-help book. It came from a warrior who stood exactly where you're standing 5,000 years ago. His name was Arun, 32 years old, a chartered accountant who'd spent the last 3 years doing something he never imagined: fighting his own father in court. It hadn't started as a fight. Arun's father Mohan had built a small textile business from nothing. 2 rooms, a handful of looms, and 40 years of sweat. But somewhere along the way, bad debts piled up, reckless partnerships, desperate decisions. By the time Arun stepped in, the business was hemorrhaging money, and his father refused to change a single thing. "This is how we've always done it," his father would say, jaw clenched. "You don't understand what it took to build this." But Arun understood more than his father realized. He'd seen the bank notices hidden in the kitchen drawer, the unpaid workers, the second mortgage on the family home, the home his grandfather had built with his own hands. So Arun did what he believed was the only responsible thing. He filed for legal control of the business, to save it, to save the family. But his father didn't see a son trying to help. He saw betrayal. And one by one, the family fractured. His uncle Prakash sided with his father. His younger brother Karan, the one Arun had taught to ride a bicycle, stopped returning his calls. Even his grandfather, 86 years old and barely able to walk, was brought into the mediation to sit across from Arun. The day of the mediation, Arun arrived early. He sat in the conference room, file organized, arguments razor sharp. 3 years of preparation had led to this moment. He was ready. Then the door opened. His father walked in first, thinner than Arun remembered. His cream-colored shirt, the one he always wore to important meetings, hung loose around his shoulders. Behind him came Uncle Prakash, who used to sneak Arun chocolates after dinner. Then Karan, his little brother, who was wearing their mother's ring, the one she'd given Karan before she passed, the one he used to press against his cheek when he was scared as a child. And last, pushed in a wheelchair by a nurse, Dadaji, his grandfather, the man who had carried Arun on his shoulders through the mango orchards behind their old house. Arun opened his mouth. The first line of his argument was right there, right at the tip of his tongue, but the words wouldn't come. Because he wasn't looking at opponents. He was looking at every person who had ever loved him, and they were all on the other side of the table. His hands began to shake. The file slipped from his fingers, and before he could stop it, tears were falling onto the polished wood of that conference table. His lawyer leaned in. "Arun, we need to start." But Arun couldn't hear him. All he could hear was the sound of his own childhood, laughter echoing through a house that no longer existed. It was his grandfather who broke the silence, not with words, not at first. The old man simply raised a trembling hand and waved the lawyers out. "Everyone, please, leave the room," Dadaji said. His voice was barely a whisper, but it carried the weight of 86 years. The lawyers protested. Arun's father stiffened, but Dadaji gave them that look, the one that had settled arguments for 3 generations, and the room emptied. Just Arun and his grandfather. The old man studied Arun's face for a long time. Then he spoke. "Beta, do you remember what I told you the day your mother died?" Arun shook his head. "I told you, the people who make you cry the most are the same people you cannot live without. You were 14. You didn't understand it then. Do you understand it now?" Dadaji wheeled himself closer. "You came here to save this family. Your father came here to protect what he built. You are both fighting for the same thing. And if you cannot see that, if all you see are arguments and bank statements and legal files, then you have already lost something no court in this world can ever return to you." Arun stared at his grandfather's face, the deep lines, the clouded eyes, and in those eyes, no judgment, no sides, just the unbearable clarity of a man who had watched his family tear itself apart from a wheelchair and was powerless to stop it. Now hear the original Sanskrit. What Arun felt in that conference room, that shattering moment of recognition, was described with devastating precision over 5,000 years ago on the battlefield of Kurukshetra. These are the words from the Bhagavad Gita, Chapter 1, verses 26 and 27. "Tatra pashyat sthitan partha pityanat pitamahan acharyan matulan bhratan putran pautran sakhins tatha tan samikshya sakonteya sarvan bandhun avasthitan kripaya parayavishto vishidan nidam bravit." Here is what these sacred words mean. There Arjuna saw, standing arrayed in both armies, fathers, grandfathers, teachers, uncles, brothers, sons, grandsons, and beloved friends. Seeing all these kinsmen present on the battlefield, Arjuna, the son of Kunti, was overwhelmed with profound compassion. Filled with deep sorrow, he spoke these words: "Fathers, grandfathers, teachers, brothers, sons, friends, not strangers, not monsters, family." Arjuna didn't break because of fear. He broke because of love, because the people he was meant to fight were the same people he was born to protect. And that is the cruelest battlefield of all, the one where the enemy has your mother's eyes, where the opponent across the table once carried you on his shoulders. Picture this, the greatest warrior of his age, a man trained his entire life for battle, a man who had never once hesitated. Arjuna asked his charioteer to drive him to the center of the battlefield, between two massive armies, so he could see exactly who he was about to fight. It was supposed to be a moment of strategic clarity, a general surveying the field. But what he saw destroyed him. On both sides stood his own blood, his beloved teacher Dronacharya, who had placed the first bow in his hands, his grandfather Bhishma, the patriarch who had loved him since birth, his cousins, his childhood friends, men who had laughed with him, eaten with him, grown up beside him, and they were all standing there, waiting to die or waiting to kill him. In that single moment, the mighty Arjuna, who could pierce a fish's eye from 100 yards, couldn't lift his arms. His legendary bow slipped from his grip. His body trembled, not from cowardice, never from cowardice, from recognition, from the unbearable weight of seeing every face you love lined up on the wrong side of a war. Just like Arun, in that conference room, file on the table, tears on his cheeks, staring at his father, his brother, his grandfather, wondering how something that began as love became this. Arun didn't win the mediation that day. He didn't lose it either, because it never happened. When everyone was called back in, Arun quietly closed his file. He looked at his lawyer and said 2 words, "Not today." His lawyer protested. 3 years of work, he said, 3 years. But Arun wasn't listening. He was looking at Karan, his little brother, sitting across the table with his jaw clenched, trying so hard to look strong, but whose hands, hidden underneath, were shaking exactly like Arun's. That evening, Arun did something he hadn't done in 3 years. He drove to his father's house. No phone call, no prepared speech. He just knocked on the door. His father opened it, and for a long moment they just stood there. 2 men who had spent 3 years trying to be right, suddenly realizing they'd rather be family. They didn't solve everything that night. The deaths were still real. The mistakes were still real. The hurt, God, the hurt was still so real. But they sat at the kitchen table, the same scratched wooden table where Arun had done his homework as a boy, and they talked. Not through lawyers, not through court notices, just a father and a son trying to find their way back. Dadaji was right. The people who make you cry the most are the same people you cannot live without. The business, they restructured it together. It wasn't Arun's plan, and it wasn't his father's plan. It was something messier, slower, and far from perfect, but it was theirs. And Karan started returning his calls. Now, listen carefully. You might be living this exact lesson right now and not even realize it. Every argument with them feels like a courtroom. You've stopped talking and started only cross-examining. There's a name in your phone you haven't dialed in months, and each time you see it, your chest tightens like a fist. You rehearse what you'll say to them, not to reconnect, but to finally prove you were right all along. The person you're most furious at is the same one you'd call first if something terrible happened tonight. If even one of those landed, these verses were speaking directly to you. Here is your Gita Journal question for today. Who is the person in your life that you're fighting, not because you don't care about them, but because you care so much it terrifies you? And what would it cost you to close the file, walk to their door, and simply knock? Write your reflection in the comments. You don't need to share names or details, but say it out loud, even if only to yourself. Because sometimes the war ends the very moment you admit you never wanted to fight. And remember this, the hardest battlefield you will ever stand on is not the one where you face your enemy. It's the one where you look across the line and see family. And the bravest thing you will ever do is put down your weapons while your heart is still breaking.